today we're very excited because we have a very special guest, Mr. Tim Mills from the ITSM People. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm very excited to dive into some stuff, but tell us a little bit about yourself, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, sure. Tim Mills, I'm the Managing Director of the ITSM People. I've had the business for over 10 years. I've worked in service management personally for 25 to 30 years now. As the name suggests, ITSM People, we specialise in ITSM and sometimes enterprise service management activity as well. Do a lot of process work, do a lot of people and culture work on the back of process work as well. And obviously, we do a bit of tooling work as well, as you'd expect.
Absolutely. And it looks to me like you've worked in a fair few customer situations as well. So you've been on the opposite side of the fence.
Yeah, bit of all sorts actually. Yeah, client side, supplier side, whether that's around tooling or service operations and so on. So I've been around the block a little bit personally. The guys and girls that work for me, they're the same. They've all been around the block. They've all worked in operational roles. So nobody's from a kind of a mainstream consulting background. Everyone's kind of been there and done it and got the t-shirt and got the scars to go with it, right? So it all helps with your level of understanding of how some of this stuff needs to work.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody on the podcast has got some scars from being involved in some areas of ITSM somewhere.
Scars are good though. Scars are good though, because I think that's the best place to learn, isn't it? I'm talking to one of our consultants at the moment. I'm like, well, something didn't go right. Do it horribly wrong not long ago. That's good. Okay, it's not gonna happen again, is it? You're gonna make sure that's not gonna happen again. So scars are good.
Yeah, it definitely is. So really excited to have your expertise here. So I guess we'll dive in with the first question, which is, I guess, customers they've always got things that they want to improve in their ITSM implementation. But what would you say is the one thing that an organization could do today without buying anything new that would significantly improve what they're doing with ITSM?
I think it's all about right sizing, right? So it's probably stating the obvious here, but a lot of organizations will buy a tool and maybe buy some functionality that they don't need and they're never going to need. But I think the first and obvious thing to suggest is get an understanding of what functionality you're already paying for and assess where you're at in terms of your current position versus where you want to be over the next 1 to 2 years, and do some mapping as to, well, here are our pain points. We've got some functionality that we're already paying for. You don't have to jump ship to a new tool. You don't have to spend a load more money. It's all about understanding what you're already paying for, because we see it time and time again. And I'm not going to mention any tools specifically, but you probably guess what I'm talking about. A lot of clients will go and buy a tool because they think it's the right.
I think we need to let people know which.
Okay. No. But we know, we've talked about this loads, Matt, right? There's a whole breadth and depth of functionality in a lot of tools, not, doesn't have to be top tier, in mid-market as well. And a lot of the time, it's not being used to its full capability. So the first step for me is always, what are we paying for? What can we leverage without spending any more money? A bit of time and effort maybe, but we don't have to spend any more money on tools because we've got all this great functionality at our fingertips. But it's all about assessing where you're at today, where you want to get to and your pain points, and then taking advantage of that functionality.
On that note then, so what's like the top, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you can reel off in your head quickly, things that represent the best quick wins in that scenario? They're not going to go down the procurement and buy something new. They've got what they've got already. Like top 3 things.
Yeah. Okay. So it very much depends. What I'm going to suggest now very much depends on where each customer is, because it's case by case in terms of what they can take advantage of and what they can't. But if I was going to rattle off 3, service catalog, knowledge management, live chat. That's where I believe you'll get the most bang for your buck in really investing some time and effort into those 3 areas to, and I'm going to throw a 4th one actually, focus on the customer experience. So whether you've got a portal or some sort of self-help, and it's linked to knowledge to an extent, I guess, but make that journey easy for the customer, right? So when they're coming in, so they enjoy taking advantage of the portal. So you're reducing calls. They're using live chat, which is a much more efficient way of running a service, of course. So, you know, there's loads of different options, and it depends case by case, but knowledge, catalog, live chat.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely interesting. What is the biggest mistake most people make when both they're using their existing tool, but also when they're thinking about buying a new one? What do you say?
I'm going to repeat what I just said. It's a classic case of don't buy what you don't need, right? So again, we see it time and time again.
Right sizing.
Great terminology, right? So what do we realistically need? What are we realistically going to take advantage of over the next 3 to 5 years, whatever deal you're going to strike with your vendor? So be realistic about what you're going to use, because some of it you're just never going to touch, right? You're just never going to get there. The vendors can do anything you want, but realistically, are you going to take advantage of that functionality? Are you ready as an organization to take advantage? And how deep are your pockets as well as an organization? So really important to really extensively research, you know, across the market. This is where we're at. This is what we're going to take advantage of. Right size a tool or several tools that's going to fit that roadmap, right? And that's the mistake we see time and time again. And again, I don't have to be tool specific here. We see it all the time. We're not using the functionality we're paying for. So it's a bit of a repeat, I guess, of an answer to the first question. The other thing that's really, really important, don't overlook the total cost of ownership, right? Yeah. So everyone puts the time and effort into, let's go and get a tool, and we get some money, and we're going to spend all this money on this tool implementation, this design, and then that's it. It stops, right? But you've got 3 or 5 years worth of journey where the business is going to change, the requirements are going to change. There's emerging technologies, whether it's around AI or whatever that is. You've got to keep up with that. So you can't overlook the cost and effort associated with managing that tool. It's a big investment, right? It's a huge investment actually for a lot of organizations. And if you're not keeping it up to date, you find yourself in 2 years' time or even 1 year time, everyone moaning that the tool's no good. Well, it's not that the tool's no good necessarily. We're just not getting the best value out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I always keep using an analogy on that. Well, I change it, but similar. Like the car is bought, fancy car in some cases, maybe not so good car in some cases. But then for whatever reason, you stop putting fuel in it. You stop doing the things to like get what you was hoping to get out of it in the first case. But yeah, the total cost of ownership is super valid point, because if you're not putting all the rest of the time, effort, and money into building that pipeline, you're going to be left stagnant. On that note, I'm not sure if you can give me a specific answer on this one. Do you generally see a sensible multiplier from, let's say, license price to how much ongoing investment? Do you ever see that notion where multiplier for that? I know it's like really subjective, really. Everyone will have their own preference.
Yeah, it's quite difficult for me to answer actually, because the involvement that we have is less about licensing costs. You know, we help a lot of clients with getting the best value out of their tool, but we don't necessarily get involved in some of the commercial aspects. Sometimes I'll do it directly with the vendor, of course. The other thing, I'm not sure it answers the question really, but really, really important to find a vendor that's ideally agnostic, that's not going to drive you down a certain path. In fact, it definitely doesn't answer the question you've just asked me, but just a really important point, right? If you're thinking about picking a tool, go and find a vendor that's got multiple tools, right? So you're not going to be steered down one particular route, because again, it doesn't work in your interest. If you don't need the best tool on the planet, you can get away with something less, but you may end up just being steered down that path because the vendor is going to get the most commission out of it, or whatever that is. And that's maybe a little bit of an unfair comment, but you get the idea, right? I can't really answer your licensing question if I'm honest. It's quite a difficult one for me to answer.
Well, what do you see, Austin? I know, like, you look at different suites of tools and things, but do you see like a rough order of magnitude multiplier for license spend versus ongoing investment spend?
It's it differs so much, I've got to say, but I think the overarching point that I think Tim was making, that I know we've made before in our podcast, is typically you're looking at what is the subscription cost for your software plus what is the implementation cost and maybe a bit of training, right? But once that implementation piece is over, how do you get to the next bit of value and the next bit of value and the next bit of value? And if you can do what Tim talked about there, of saying, well, why don't we, instead of buying everything this vendor has to offer at this super duper deal, why don't we buy what we need and spend the rest, have a pot that we can invest in to make sure we actually get the value and we use the pieces that we need, such as things like CMDB that I know you and I harp on about all the time, right? Which is constantly underinvested in, instead of some new interesting stuff that's coming along. I think, and actually, we just got a really good question related to that, because in the chat, which is that vendors are pushing a lot of AI functionality very heavily in the ITSM space at the moment. What point in the maturity journey should organizations look at these features, or is it just a cynical ploy by the vendors to jump on the Gen AI bandwagon and sell us more things that we probably don't need yet?
Cheers for that question, Chris.
Who's that question from? It's a great question.
That is from Chris
great
Greenfield.
Question. Yeah. So I actually did a podcast a month or so ago with the Accession guys where we talked a lot about AI actually. And it came back to it depends what we're talking about AI, right? So if you're using, predictive analytics and so on, it's only going to be as good as the data and the ticket logging practices that you've got, really, really important. And the same when it comes to kind of AI chatbots and so on, unless you've got a really good knowledge management practice in place, how good can your AI capability be? Because it's looking for things that aren't necessarily there. So in my opinion, again, I can only comment on what I see, but I think you need a solid knowledge management practice and a solid incident management practice, and maybe problem as well, before you should be delving into AI. That's my personal opinion. I don't know quite how it's been spun by some of the vendors at the moment, but it is the new thing. In fact, when we were on that podcast a few weeks ago, we were talking about AI is the new CNDB, right? In the way that it's been spun. It's going to answer all your problems, all your prayers, resolve all your problems, but how much time and effort and what baseline of maturity do you need in place before you can take advantage of all that functionality? Otherwise, again, you're paying for something that's just not going to be very effective, potentially.
So now I definitely sympathize with the idea of AI being buzzword, bandwagon, all the rest of it for sure. I do think though there's some finite use cases where some degree of cognitive ability, just some basic MML, I suspect, will rapidly accelerate some areas. And there's a couple of products I've seen, I'm sure others will follow, where maybe example, it can just automatically summarize all of the notes, which as an analyst, that's a ball ache. You've gone through, there's 50 updates, it's my shift now. So there's a couple of tools out there that are already summarizing those as a basic thing, but very, very, very useful. Or a couple of tools as well, different ones, that will understand the context of what you're raising, but then do some activity associated to it. So kind of linked to knowledge, but it's also just, okay, well, it looks like this kind of ticket, you've categorized it like this before. So should we do that again? Shall we do that again? And little things like that, it saves a few seconds here for the analyst, a few seconds there, makes a difference. So depending on the use case, I'm definitely against the whole idea it's going to save the world for this context at the moment. But if the use case is selected appropriately, I think it doesn't really matter what level of maturity the organizer's in.
I think you've hit the nail on the head though, if it's selected appropriately, right? Rather than going, right, AI, it's going to fix everything, right? You're picking those things that and that's a really good example of a use case, right? So whether that's creating an incident report or a major incident report and summarizing all of the activities, you might have 30 pages of updates, but actually we only just want to bunch in. You see the same thing with meetings, stuff like Meet Geek, and there's a Teams plugin and all that kind of stuff. Really powerful, right? So no question, if you pick the right stuff, but AI is quite a broad topic, right? So what specific functionality are we paying for? What are we going to use? And can we dissect that to only pay for what we need? So that's a right sizing yet again, right? So whether it's AI or whatever, it's right sizing. I guess the other thing as well, you know, sometimes it's overlooked, kind of going away from AI a little bit now, but you know, we've seen a few times where there's when clients are choosing a tool, there's a lack of appreciation for all the existing platforms that are in place today, right? So whether that's around HR systems or AD, or you know, whatever it is that you could do with plugging in some way, shape, or form, or a CRM and so on, and just not thinking about that compatibility. Now, there's a wider conversation there, of course, around enterprise service management, and maybe thinking about choosing a tool that actually you can replace some of those other tools. So you've got one platform that you're administering and so on. But that's a big conversation, a big project, of course. But again, it's often overlooked as to the compatibility between, right, we're going to buy this tool, and then we get it and go, oh yeah, actually it doesn't, you know, we can't actually get ITSM and DevOps talking to each other now because we haven't got the right tools in place. Or, you know, we could do with having some sort of integration with our HR system for our joiners, movers, leavers, but we can't integrate it, right? So what do? We've got loads of manual effort, loads of forms and so on.
Does the notion of that largely stem from poor design, poor scoping activities? Because
absolutely,
you know, I mean, you've definitely seen, as have I, as I'm sure Austin as well, like the vast differences in requirements gathering exercises from pretty slim, which probably been a golf course sale, maybe, who knows, speculation, all the way through to like hundreds and hundreds of requirements. We've probably gone to 10 there. I think like the requirements activity and the design activity should mitigate those scenarios and make sure the right things plug into each other. But yeah, I've seen both scales, both very, very short. We need to get it in. Retrofitting business cases, bloody hell. Oh, and the business case note, I was going to ask. So making sure it gives the right level of response back. What about ongoing measurements? That like in the buying a new product activity, what about the ongoing measurements? That rarely takes place. It's the deal's done, business case is gone, in gathering dust. What about
and just let me expand on that a little bit first, because I think this is something that more and more CFOs are asking their IT teams, right? Gone are the days where you got an investment, you made an investment, and then that was that, and it was written off. Nowadays, you have to go back in 12 months' time and say, here we go. This is what we've returned to the business for this pot of money that you gave us for a new ITSM tool. And I think that ROI, is it ever doable? Is it, you know, what are the things that you're seeing that really make a difference to the business in the ITSM world that are measurable, that customers can show back, whether it's an existing tool, like you were just saying there, or whether it's a, you know, something they've just put in that's brand new?
There's some obvious areas like automation. I mentioned live chat earlier on, often overlooked as the commercial benefits of that, because it's much more efficient to be running several chats than phone calls and so on. Self-help, shift left. You know, it's not specific around the tools. There's things that you need to do outside the tool, but the tool will then facilitate that, right? But again, there's some service management dependencies and so on. But there are
talking about using those to take people out of level 1, level 2 support, and therefore less people gives you your ROI on that tool.
Well, yeah. So if you think of shift left as an example, right? So again, it comes back to knowledge management, moving support from third line into second line, and second line into first line, and first line into user self-help, right? By furnishing people with the right knowledge and the right level of skills and training and access and all that kind of stuff. You're constantly reducing your cost of running a service. And again, that's not about the tool as such. It's stuff that needs to happen outside the tool, but the tool will facilitate that from a knowledge management perspective. There's really, really important live chat. And again, I'm not talking about AI bots and so on, but you can have 2 or 3 chats running at the same time. You can't have 2 or 3 phone calls running at the same time. So again, really powerful way of reducing the cost of service. Automation, obviously, as well, right? So if you have got opportunities to automate, whether that's actually resolution, you know, ServiceNow, as we know, can plug into, as a lot of platforms do, plug into all sorts of Microsoft platforms and so on, and actually self-heal. But you know, there's lots of other opportunities like automatic triaging, automating your change process. There's loads of automation opportunities, but it again depends where the client's at and what they can take advantage of in their maturity position and so on.
Okay, so if you were a client who was like, okay, I'm going to put a business case together to move from our old ITSM system, you'd be putting that business case together around shifting left and taking cost out of that level 1 to 3 people essentially, which we know is typically level 1, level 2. They're moving around between organizations left, right, and center, right? And then you're having to hire new people who are costing you 30% more than the last people and whatever. So it is an expensive part. Or you're working with third-party vendors, right, who are providing those functions for you and are fairly expensive and potentially take costs out that way, I guess.
I think, we touched on AI being a bit of a delicate area earlier on about, how it's been sold and so on, but there will be huge opportunities with AI, but it's all about picking the right functionality that's going to match where you are. So again, comes back to knowledge management, some of those other things, because if you haven't got those in place, then it's very difficult to take some of those things out and actually implement AI effectively. But most tools have got a level of automation activity. All tools have got a knowledge base of sorts. But it just depends. You just require some work to just take a look at the landscape and go, right, well, where are our opportunities? What do we do today? And what could we do? Whether that's about moving a costly 20% of our tickets go to third line. Well, can we move that into second line? Because second line are cheaper. Right, they're cheaper. We can free up the third line to do project stuff, right? Actually, can we move that stuff to first line support? Well, yeah, we probably can if we just make sure we're a bit careful with the access privileges and so on, and give them a bit of training. All that means that you're reducing the cost of service constantly. Now, again, that's not tool dependent, but it's part of the business case, or at least it absolutely should be, that whilst we're doing this exercise, we're going to be looking for ways to save money. Some tools will come bundled with cost-saving abilities like automation and AI and so on. But again, it just depends how you implement it as to whether you're going to get the value.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's also something important there around, these, particularly things like level 3 resources, right? They are typically involved in building the next generation of applications that are going to make a difference to your business and help you differentiate yourself in the marketplace. So every time a resource is pulled off a project to go and help with a serious problem, that they're not being productive in moving those projects forward. And it's often quite hard to quantify, but it's often massively important as these businesses digitally transform themselves, right? And if somebody gets in ahead of you with a new product you were bringing to market because your level 3 guys were off solving problems in the applications they wrote in previous years, then it can have a huge impact. Okay,
that's a really good point, right? Because there's always been a big debate between, and it depends who shouts loudest, but the big debate between what's more important, this incident over here or this project, right? As you just suggested, there might be go-to-market targets for whatever reason, and more often than not, the CIO will be targeted some way with delivering a number of projects per year, whatever they are, whether it's to save money and so on. But then you've got a load of incidents coming in over here, so we've got to pull the guys off the project, as you just said, and it is difficult to quantify, and it does depend. Say he who shouts loudest and all that, but the classic mistake we see time and time again, of course, is just not enough problem management work going on. So to accompany all this, if you're not putting enough effort into, and this is a project in its own right? Let's stop some incidents happening, because then we can free ourselves up to do other stuff. We're never going to stop every single incident happening, right? There's always going to be incidents, there's always going to be requests, but there's always loads of home goals, right? Whether that's about poor change process or poor technology or just poor service management practices or whatever it is. But it is difficult to find that balance, and it is difficult to quantify the downside of, we've got to move that guy over there to do this major incident, because a major incident's happening right now, so it feels more important. Is it more important in the grand scheme of things? Don't know. That's a bit case by case.
I think there's like a different perspective on that as well. And I was having part of this conversation yesterday. Like, you talk about, should we pull the trigger on buying this product or this product or this product? Like, anything from an enterprise perspective should have some degree of dotted line back to, like, does it move the needle on the business? We spoke about this before, us in our own strategy, right? So do these things support the strategy? And there'll be some nice representation from end to end. The end over here being the product or capability you're going to buy, through to what the business is doing over here, and some cool KPIs and things that are measurable. So in a scenario where, like, we've got a flood of incidents coming in, I mean, let's say there's just a bunch of P2s, P3s or something less impactful in terms of the live service. But actually, the time spent fixing those P3s and reducing those down is insignificant compared to this capability with sugar onboarding, because this one maps back to these business KPIs. But that's the visibility I think common I don't see in a lot of organisations where they've had that clear path of here's what the business needs, here's what's going to achieve it, because it might not be a good idea to look after the instance in those cases. We've had a question come in. I'm not sure if you spotted it, Austin.
Oh, go on.
I have, yeah. So we were just about to change tack actually slightly, which and the question is related to another question that I kind of had anyway, which is around, you know, which surrounding tools make the biggest difference to ITSM owners. Certainly the problem that I've seen in most companies who are disillusioned with their ITSM tool is that they're not putting great data into it. So therefore, they're just running around with a prettier looking tool that's probably more expensive, but their users aren't empowered to do anything with it because there's no good data in there. You know, whether that's CI data, service data, you know, triage data, etc., or you know, knowledge management data, etc., as you said. And the question that we had that was related to that from Stephen Davison was that he is seeing ITAM data as the thing at the moment that organizations are really trying to improve on to make a huge difference to ITSM. So
I think it's a really interesting observation, and for whatever reason, we're seeing more CMDB related projects over the last 6 to 12 months than I've ever seen.
Why is that though?
And I don't know why.
Not coming out.
I don't know.
There.
Well, you've been involved with some of these conversations, so you know.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. It's quite bizarre, and some of that isn't specifically IT assets, right? Some of it is non-IT assets, but clients go, well, hang on a minute, we need a way of managing our assets, and at that point, they're not necessarily thinking about the relationships between their assets. They're just going, we need an asset management strategy. Non-IT assets, you know, one example that I'm talking about. But when you start talking about it, it's not just the assets they want to track. They want to start thinking about the relationships between those assets and the impact of if that asset goes, what's the impact on these assets over here? So there seems to be a thrust of activity around ITAM and SACM at the moment. And I don't know why. Like, you know, I haven't put any effort into researching why that might be. Maybe we'll ask ChatGPT. But it seems to be coming out more and more that there's a requirement around CMDB. Whereas over the years, CMDB has always been sold, I think, as maybe we touched on it earlier on, the solution to everyone's problems, not realizing all the effort and stuff that needs to go into it, right? So a lot of the time people have bought a platform thinking they're going to have a great functioning CMDB. They realize how much effort there's going to be in managing it. And then they go, oh yeah, we've got bigger things to worry about, like incidents and requests. Not realizing that if you get your CMDB data in order, actually all of that kind of starts managing itself a little bit better. But it can be such a beast of activity unless you've got the right tools in place and the right people, because you need a management wrap around it. Well, the tool's not going to manage itself. That's always been the thing around CMDB. Vendors show you the tool, go, look at all this magical stuff it can do. You go, yeah, we'll take that. And then you realize how much effort there's required. But there is definitely a thrust of activity at the moment around ITAM. And I don't know why. But I guess it comes back to Austin. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. Well, everyone's marketing AI now. They're not even marketing.
Oh yeah, but maybe
everyone's moving to AI.
But Austin made the point earlier on that AI is like the CMDB was. So maybe now, like AI's come in, people are like, oh, remember that CMDB thing? Well, we're not getting forced it now. Maybe we should go and look at it. So maybe after AI, there'll be something else, and AI will be cool. Who knows?
It's back to what you were saying though, Austin. There's the whole there's different phrases to use, but you know, crap in, crap out, and it doesn't matter whether it's data from Active Directory or your HR system or your discovery tools or knowledge, whatever it is. The tool is kind of irrelevant in a way. But if you don't get it set up in the right way, and if you don't do that, you're definitely not going to get decent reporting. And I think you touched on it earlier on, Matt. We're working with a client at the moment who's got ServiceNow, right? They don't do any reporting. right? They just don't. It's just like, what, right? You know, it just right. You're not making any data-driven decisions to help with your strategy and all that kind of stuff. Paying for the most expensive tool on the market, arguably. So yes, you know, unless you're doing that reporting, unless you've got solid data going in, you're never going to be able to take advantage of all the benefits, all those reports that you can get to help with your strategy and so on. But yeah, crap in, crap out. You know, whether it's IT asset data, user data, whatever that is, it's really important to get the data correct.
Yeah, totally agree, and it's the bane of my life as well. I'm more in the monitoring space and discovery space and mapping and things, but the number of companies that have said, oh well, we're just going to put a layer of AI over what we've got, and I'm like, well, it hasn't given you any answers for the last 20 years, so I don't think an AI engine is going to help. But yeah, all all good.
The other thing that we're seeing quite a lot around other tools that could add quite a bit of benefit, I guess. When the obvious one is Teams, right? Or Slack, or what, you know, most organizations will use Teams. They prefer to chat that way. If you can integrate that with your ITSM solution, so you're queuing chats as opposed to people just going, oh, I know Jeff in the third line team, I'll just message him directly. That kind of defeats the object a little bit, right? But if you can integrate those chats with a chat solution that's going to queue chats to the right people based on skills and availability and all that kind of stuff, it's an obvious place to start, because most organizations use Teams or something similar, right? So if you can plug in your ITSM platform to that, everybody's used to using it, and it's just a nice, it's on everyone's desktops, it's easy to use. They've not even got to go to a portal to go and log a chat, you know, that kind of stuff. So really, really powerful.
I'm working with a couple of different customers now, and Teams is the preference. I haven't worked with Slack much on this basis, but they're bringing the ITSM capability, both the conversational part and also the portal, embedded into the Teams channel. So like the user from a context point of view never needs to go anywhere else. It's all like in the same space. That's like a nice to show.
And that's where AI can come in really, really well as well, right? If you get AI plugged into that to go and do some sort of knowledge search and stuff like that as well. So again, you've not even got to go to a portal. It's just all there. You know, it's just all there in your Teams window to get yourself the support that you need, whether that's self-help, logging a ticket, live chat, you know, whatever that is. If you can plug that in, loads of benefit there, because you're just removing a step, right? So just make it as easy as you can for the users.
Yeah, I agree. Right, we've talked a lot and been through a lot of really great stuff. Just going to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about.
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Go for it.
There's two questions that come in. Let's just give these guys a chance. So one's come from Kareen at Appleby. David, or a hangover from the paramedic for a couple of years, needed to just get hardware deployed, whatever the means now. The hangover of this shotgun approach is catching up. Okay, just a comment. And then a comment from David Barrow. I think most watching this will know David Barrow. Rather than looking at the larger picture and treating assets like knowledge, be explicit about the need and the desired value, and then apply knowledge to ITAM and onto AI to provide better MI and enhanced service.
Wise words indeed.
Yeah, totally agree with that. As we always say, you know, whatever you're going to do, you need to look at what's the business requirement for this. Is it going to move the needle on something important, an important outcome to the business? Otherwise, you shouldn't be doing it.
That point from David there is like really poignant, because like historically, not so much these days, asset discovery C&D was like bread and butter into the technical weeds as well. And the mistake I made as a technologist was, I've got a discovery tool, great. I've got a C&D, there you go, 1 million CIs. Who's ready for a beer? We're good now. Versus actually, like these days, it's like as lean as possible. What is that strict data model you're going to be conforming to? What are you going to put where, why? So rather than having 100% of the available attributes, I'll be more, I don't know, 15%, 20%, because it's going to be easy to manage that, and you're not going to flood it with rubbish. So just a relevant point there.
I think it's a really good point, Matt. And we've talked about this before around CMDBs, and scoping it from the outset is just so important, right? Just rather than just opening the floodgates and going, you know, information overload. Just think about what are our critical services? What are the really important things that we need to discover, and the relationships that we need to understand? Start there, and don't bite off more than you can chew. I think that's often the thing that once people open the doors with a CMDB and they just go, wow, all right, okay, we need 2 or 3 people to manage all this data. We haven't got time for that. We're going to do something else. It's just really off-putting. But you can do it in a way that's going to drive a load of value in terms of understanding your really important systems and critical services and so on, and just doing it step by step, and just, as I say, not biting off more than you can chew.
Good, wonderful. Right, we generally try and aim for about this time to finish up. But before I summarise what we've talked about, do you just want to give our listeners a view of your wonderful company, the ITSM People, and how you help customers?
Yeah, sure. I'll touch on it at the start, obviously, but as the name suggests, ITSM People, we do a lot of ITSM consulting work, which ranges from anything from running some workshops and doing some tactical service improvement work, right the way through to multi-million-pound M&A projects, right, where we're building completely new operating models and helping organizations separate or merge, choosing new tools, choosing new vendors, employing a team of people. So it very much ranges, but we do a lot of assessment work, which I think we're getting more and more known for the assessment work, actually. And a lot of the time, that's where the journey starts. It all ties in nicely to what we've been talking about here with the tooling. Understanding, I think there's the misconception around, a maturity assessment. Everyone goes, oh, why do I need a score? Right? I don't care. Right? We just want to know where we're going to get the most value. And what's often overlooked is the amount of depth and knowledge that you get out of an assessment to understand where our pain points are, or what our strategy should be, or what tool we might need to choose because of where we are on the maturity scale. So the benefits are multifaceted with an assessment, and often that's the place to start with a client. And a lot of times, once we do an assessment can take anything from a matter of weeks to many months, depending on the size and shape of it all. And a lot of the time, then we'll get us to help on the implementation or the execution of a number of those observations and recommendations we've made. And as I mentioned at the start of the call, a lot of the time, this is about people and culture as opposed to the processes. Everyone just thinks ITIL, flow charts, right? And incident requests and all that. And it is about that stuff. But a lot of the time, it's about the people that are delivering those services, and lack of understanding about, maybe there's been attrition of staff, or people just need a bit of training, or don't really like the way the change process works. But it's not that the whole change process is failed, but maybe just some of it, right? So a lot of the time we don't necessarily write, I mean, we do on some occasions, but we don't go in and write a load of processes from scratch. You can just go and download process off the internet. It's how you bring those to life, and making sure that people really understand them, and almost just doing a bit of a sales job and selling the benefits of service management. A lot of people hate change processes, right? Because it's too clunky, or it's deemed to be bureaucratic and slow and whatever. But if you set it up in the right way, it doesn't have to be like that. The change is a really good example, actually. We do a lot of work around change and major incident management and so on. And it's amazing how many organizations still don't do some of this stuff. In fact, I was talking to the accession guys a couple of weeks ago about this, that I don't know whether it's because of distractions over the last 5 or 10 years, whether that's around COVID and we've got to do stuff faster, and digital transformation and DevOps and all those kind of things. It almost feels like some organizations have taken their eye off the ball a little bit and just kind of left ITSM. And not left it, but maybe just be focused on other things. And a lot of times when we go into an organization to do an assessment now, it's some of those really basic things. And it's nice to know that David's here, because David and I have been doing some work together on this on and off for a good few years now. And a lot of the stuff that we come across, it's the real basic stuff. It's cost of service and incident management and lack of problem management. And there's no service catalog, or you've got 5 service catalogs scattered around the estate, and nobody really knows what they can consume and what we support and how we support it. And all that leads to just waste of time, lack of problem management. We're just getting loads of incidents. Major incident process doesn't work very well. Change process is clunky, so nobody follows it. So we're causing ourselves incidents. It's all those basic things that have been around forever, right? That a lot of the time we're going in and going, well, hang on, let's just, we keep using the phrase back to basics, but let's just take a step back and go and fix some of these things. It is a good phrase. We know it is because we use it a lot, and it's really important, right? Let's just take a step back and think about where are we getting the most pain, can we free up some time and money by fixing some of these things over here that might make, enable us to be able to do some of this more jazzy stuff or take advantage of some of the new functionality in the tools. But let's get some of those basic things right. And I'm talking like, previous versions of ITIL, like V2, V3 type stuff, not anything new. So we see that a lot. Hopefully that gives you enough of a view, Austin. I don't know whether you've got any questions on that specifically, but we are seeing a bit of a surge in back to basics.
Yeah,
as well as CMDB. For whatever
absolutely
reason.
agree. I was just laughing at you talking about the change process. There's so many haters of the cab still. It's always a topic of.
It just screams a poor implementation. It just screams a poor implementation, or it was set up in a certain way years ago. The world now moves faster, and we can't wait for a weekly cab or a fortnightly cab or whatever that is anymore. But that doesn't mean to say that change management or change enablement, obviously as we call it now, doesn't work. You just need to get it set up in the right way. So you take advantage of standard changes and you plug stuff into DevOps. Do approvals on the fly in the tool. You don't have to wait for a weekly cab, right? There's loads of ways to speed up a change process. But we see it time and time again. We go somewhere and they go, "Oh, the change process, change management's rubbish. ITIL's rubbish." Like, it's just not set up in the right way to enable your organization.
I was gonna have one question earlier. I know we're like kind of running a bit over now, but it's related to that topic. The importance of the actual process side of things. Like, people buy a tool and go, "It's on, let's go," and then they haven't really put the foundation in place. But like, if you was to pick one core process in terms of like what will give the biggest impact when it's done properly within the tool, like which one? I know there's a handful, right? But like,
oh god, that's a really difficult. Only one. That's a really difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
You could argue that I don't think I can choose one actually, but if I've got to choose one, maybe knowledge management. But I think incident, change, problem, and knowledge are where you, and maybe catalog. Sorry, that's five. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck in stabilizing your service. Right, you get those things working right, the right kind of level. It will free up some time to do other stuff. It's difficult to choose one, Matt. It is. That's a really difficult question.
I won't ask.
What do you? Let me turn that around on you. Actually, what do you think? Rather than all these questions being fired at me, what do you think are the most important practices?
I think the front door stuff. So we're in instant requests. That needs to be adequate in the first case. But I think often the foundational stuff isn't in place. Because on ITSM specifically, when that's being sold as a dream and stuff to customers, all the stuff that's being presented in the demo, it's like linked to having a good solid foundation. And we talk about it time and time again, but the asset, the CDV, the whatever else. So arguably, I'd say we need to deal with the front door stuff, but having that solid foundation, which a lot of things link to, that needs to be in place. That's got to be the most important, but also the most neglected. So go figure.
I think it's a really good point. Right? Because when we talk about incident management, it's not just about the incident process itself. There's so much that sits behind that, whether it's asset data, whether it's knowledge data, whether it's ITAM, whatever it is. Unless you've got that, you are definitely wasting a lot of time on incidents and incident management and not handling it maybe in as fast as you can. So I think it's a bit misleading actually when we just talk about incident management alone, because like all ITIL practices, they're all intrinsically linked. You can't just do one without doing some of the others effectively. And I think that gets overlooked a lot. Everyone just thinks front door, but as you say, it's all that foundational data that sits behind the scenes to enable those practices to work correctly.
Well, now I was just trying to wrap up here, so I think we should give some space.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim. It's been a wonderful, wonderful session.
It's gone really quick, actually. It's gone quick.
Yeah, it's gone quick. Yeah, it has.
It has, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree to come back at some point, and we can talk about some more of this stuff in more depth. But today we've talked about where should a customer start? What would be the one thing that would make the big impact to any organization? And you said right sizing. Make sure that you are only paying for the things that you need. Look at what you need now for the next 18 months to 2 years and only work on that. The four areas that are really key in making a difference: service management, knowledge management, live chat, customer experience is where you should put your focus. Don't overlook TCO when you're looking to buy a new ITSM tool. You need to look at the 3 to 5 year journey and what you need to invest over that time, not just to get it up and running. You said that AI is only as good as your knowledge management and incident practice. So if those things aren't in good shape, then don't bother going down the AI journey just yet. And make sure that when you do choose a platform, you choose something that can integrate with your HR, your DevOps platforms, etc., etc. On the ROI side, you said automation and live chat. Try and shift left as much as possible so that you can free up your level 2, level 3 people to do valuable stuff that drives the business forward and take cost out of those typical operations. And that we're seeing more CMDB projects than ever. And so that ITAM, SACM, discovery service mapping piece seems to be quite a hot topic at the moment. And finally, that Teams and Slack integration into ITSM is a really super useful piece so that you can capture all that data in the process and not have people pinging around. No, there was loads of other bits and pieces, but those are the key sort of points, I think. Anything I've missed, Matt?
No, but I need to say something before we finish. So
go for it.
So our next live is confirmed. It's going to be, date may change, but it's likely to be the 27th of September. And it's going to be with Nick Dimmock, who is a asset discovery, service modeling, all the above expert. So we were bringing that session in about 4 or 5 weeks. I'll send out the invites and that'll come out in the next week or two. And that'll be an asset discovery and service modeling focused conversation.
Timely, given what we've just been talking about then.
Yeah, I mean, so relevant, so relevant. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So thank you all for watching. Really appreciate it. If you've got any topics that you would like us to cover in the future, drop them into the chat or drop myself or Matt a line anytime. If you yourself would like to be a guest on the show or know anyone that you think would be a great guest, please do let us know. And then finally, a massive thank you to you, Tim. Tim Mills of the ITSM People. Do check him out, everybody. Been an absolutely great session. So thank you all very much. This will be available on a YouTube, Spotify, etc. for anybody that didn't get to listen to it all, or if you want to share it around.